Okay, so today we're going deep into UK corporate governance.
Always a fascinating topic.
It is, and we're zeroing in on the 2024 Corporate Governance Code.
Right.
Now, I know some people hear that and think, oh no, another huge document to wade through.
Yeah.
But that's where we come in, right?
Exactly.
We're going to distill everything down to what you really need to know.
Absolutely, the need-to-know nugget.
Exactly. And to help us do that, we've got expert speaker title here in the studio with us today. So welcome.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
Always happy to talk shop.
Okay, so to set the stage,
Yeah.
we've got two main documents in front of us, right?
Okay.
The first one is the UK Corporate Governance Code 2024 itself.
Yep, the main attraction.
Exactly. It lays out all the principles, all the provisions, kind of the what to do. And then we've got this other document, Corporate Governance Code Guidance, which is a bit meatier.
Yeah, it really gets into the why behind the what.
It does. It's like the explainer, the color commentary.
Right. And with some good examples sprinkled in, I'd say.
Exactly. So for those boardroom discussions, it's good to have.
Definitely.
Now, the UK Corporate Governance Code has been around for a while.
It has.
Since 1992, actually. So
Quite a legacy.
it is. But this 2024 update is a more targeted revision.
It is, yeah. This one's mainly focused on internal controls and reporting.
Which is interesting because it really seems like the FRC is saying, okay, enough talk, let's see some action.
Definitely. They're putting their foot down when it comes to transparency and accountability.
Right. No more just saying, we're committed to good governance. It's show us how.
Exactly. And that's where Principle C comes into play.
Yeah. Principle C seems to be all about reporting on outcomes, showing actual progress.
It is. It's about demonstrating how those governance practices are actually making a difference.
So for someone listening who's thinking, okay, but how does this affect me as an investor? What should they be looking for?
Well, instead of just vague statements about, let's say, we value diversity,
Right.
you should see concrete evidence.
They're actually promoting diversity.
Exactly what the measurable impact has been.
So it's like looking for proof in the pudding.
Basically, you want to see the why behind their decisions and the effect those decisions had.
Like a clear line between good governance and positive results for the business.
Exactly. It's not just talk. It's about action and outcomes.
And this ties into the update to Provision 2 as well, right? Which really emphasizes embedding the company culture you want.
Yes, it's about more than just words on paper. It has to be a genuine shift in how the company operates.
So how do companies actually do that? What are some ways they can show this change?
Well, the guidance gives a few good examples.
Okay.
Like, for instance, linking executive compensation to those cultural goals you want to achieve.
Right.
So it's one thing to say you value ethical behavior. It's another to link executive bonuses to reaching those ethical targets.
So putting your money where your mouth is, essentially.
Exactly. And there are other things, too, like incorporating your values into performance reviews.
Oh, interesting.
Even just the language used in internal communications.
Right. So it becomes part of the fabric of how you do business every day.
Precisely. It should be reflected in everything.
And it's not just about avoiding scandals, although obviously that's important. It's about creating a culture of doing the right thing.
Yes, fostering ethical decision-making, engaging your employees, and encouraging innovation. It all contributes to better business outcomes in the end.
Absolutely. So we've talked about talking the talk and walking the walk, and that brings us to risk management. And Section 4 in particular got a pretty big overhaul in this update.
It did. Section 4, and especially Provision 29, has been a hot topic.
Yeah, what's the deal with Provision 29?
Well, it requires companies to explicitly state how effective their internal controls are over financial reporting.
Okay, and why is that such a big deal?
Well, think about it. Recent high-profile corporate collapses have really shown how vital robust internal controls are.
Right, to prevent errors, to detect fraud.
Exactly, and ultimately to ensure that financial reporting is accurate.
So it's about giving investors more confidence.
Precisely. By having companies vouch for their controls, the FRC aims for more transparency, and ultimately that should increase investor confidence.
It's about rebuilding trust, which, let's be honest, has taken a hit in recent years.
Definitely.
And speaking of trust, or maybe the lack of it sometimes,
Yeah.
let's move on to a topic that always gets people talking, executive pay. Section 5 covers remuneration, and there are some interesting changes there.
Oh, executive pay always sparks debate, and this update definitely didn't disappoint.
So what are some of the key changes there?
Well, one big one is the push to align executive compensation with the interests of both shareholders and the workforce as a whole.
So it's not just about keeping the shareholders happy.
Exactly. The FRC is acknowledging that a company's success is driven by more than just shareholder returns.
Right. It's the employees, the customers, the community.
Exactly. It's about considering the interests of all stakeholders.
And how does that translate into actual changes in the code?
Well, for example, there's a new requirement for executive pension contributions to be in line with what's offered to other employees.
Right. So no more lavish executive pension plans while other employees get a less generous deal.
Exactly. It's a move towards greater fairness and equity in compensation packages.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in practice.
Definitely. Implementation and enforcement will be key.
Absolutely. And another interesting addition is the inclusion of malice and clawback provision.
Ah, yes. Those are powerful tools.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with these terms, myself included until recently,
Haha. It's quite the jargon, isn't it?
it is explaining to us like we're 5 years old.
Okay, so malice basically means you can reduce a bonus that's been promised.
Okay.
And clawback is even stronger. It means you can actually take back a bonus that's already been paid out.
And when would these provisions be triggered?
Well, typically in situations where there's been poor performance, or if an executive has engaged in some kind of misconduct.
So if a CEO messes up big time.
Right. The company can say, you know, that bonus you got, yeah, we're taking that back.
So it's about holding executives accountable for their actions even after they've left the company.
Precisely. It's a strong message about aligning executive behavior with the long-term success and reputation of the company.
It seems the FRC is really serious about this update. Good governance matters. Transparency is key, and if you're an executive, you better be on top of your game.
That's a great summary.
But as we all know, often the real insights are in the details.
Absolutely. The devil is in the details, as they say.
So let's dig into some of those fascinating nuggets. Those little details that really bring this code to life. What's the first one that comes to mind for you?
Well, one that really struck me was about boardroom dynamics. You know how important it is to have a good mix of perspectives on a board?
Right, to avoid that whole groupthink thing.
Exactly.
Where everyone's just agreeing and no one's really thinking critically.
Yeah, and the guidance actually uses a really interesting analogy.
Oh.
It talks about, imagine a board where everyone's a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Now, they might be brilliant lawyers,
Sure.
but would they necessarily spot those crucial business trends or understand customer needs?
Or even the ethical implications of some decisions.
Exactly. So it's not just about ticking boxes, it's about genuine diversity of thought.
Right, because a diverse board isn't just good optics. It actually leads to better decisions.
Absolutely. More innovation, more adaptability, ultimately more success.
Makes sense. Now, another thing that resonated with me was the FRC's focus on real workforce engagement.
It's not just a box-ticking exercise anymore.
Right, it's not enough to just have a policy. It's about making employees feel heard and valued.
And the guidance actually gives some good practical examples.
Oh, like what?
Well, for one thing, regular town hall meetings.
Where employees can directly question leadership.
Exactly. Or how about employee advisory panels to get feedback on company policies?
That's a good idea.
Even just simple things like regular surveys to gauge employee sentiment can go a long way.
It's about showing employees you're listening, not just going through the motions.
Exactly. And they even mention reverse mentoring.
Reverse mentoring. What's that?
So you pair senior executives with more junior employees.
Interesting.
The idea is for the executives to get a fresh perspective on the company culture.
So they can see things through the eyes of their employees.
Precisely. It's about bridging that gap between the boardroom and the rest of the company.
I like it. And it all ties back to that idea of building a culture of trust and mutual respect.
Absolutely. When employees feel heard and valued, they're more likely to be engaged and productive.
And that brings us to another important theme that's woven throughout the code, and the guidance fostering an ethical and supportive business culture.
It's about doing the right thing even when no one is watching.
Right, and a big part of that is having robust whistleblowing policies.
Absolutely. Provision 6 really emphasizes that.
Making sure employees feel safe to raise concerns without fear of retaliation.
Exactly. It's not enough to just have a policy in place, though.
Right, it's about creating a culture where speaking up is encouraged.
Where employees feel empowered to raise any issues, big or small.
And where those issues are taken seriously.
Yes. The guidance talks about building a speak-up culture.
I like that, a speak-up culture. So it becomes part of the company's DNA.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment of open and honest communication at all levels.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered so much ground, from the key changes to those fascinating details. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what's the overarching message here? What does it all mean?
Well, I think what's really interesting is how the FRC is pushing for a more holistic approach to corporate governance.
What do you mean by that?
It's not just about ticking boxes or complying with regulations anymore. It's about weaving good governance into the very fabric of the company.
So it's not just a department or a set of rules, it's part of the company's DNA.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that good governance isn't just good ethics, it's good business.
And why should the listener care about any of this? How does it affect them in their everyday lives?
Well, it's about the bigger picture, right? Good governance, it's not just some abstract concept. It has real-world consequences.
Right, it's about people's lives ultimately.
Exactly. It affects employees, investors, customers, the community as a whole.
It's about trust, really.
It is. Would you rather do business with a company known for its ethical behavior or one that's constantly in the news for the wrong reasons?
That's a no-brainer. So let's bring it back to our listener. If you're involved with a UK-listed company, whether you're on the board, an employee, or an investor, what are the key takeaways from this updated code?
I'd say the big takeaway is that simply explaining away non-compliance isn't going to cut it anymore.
Right. It's not enough to just say, oh, we couldn't comply with this particular provision because of this or that.
Exactly. Explanations need to be more robust. You have to demonstrate a real commitment to the principles behind the code.
So it's not just about ticking boxes. It's about really embracing the spirit of good governance.
Precisely. And it's not just about avoiding a slap on the wrist from the FRC either.
Right. It's about the long game.
Exactly. Companies that really take this to heart, they're the ones who are going to reap the benefits.
Like increased investor confidence, a stronger reputation, a more engaged workforce.
All of which contribute to long-term sustainable success.
Absolutely. So it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Exactly.
And how can our listeners really make a difference here? How can they contribute to good governance in their own spheres of influence?
Well, if you're on a board, it's about asking those tough questions, holding management accountable.
Don't be afraid to rock the boat a little.
Exactly. And if you're an employee, don't be afraid to speak up, raise concerns, participate in initiatives that promote good governance.
And for investors.
Do your research, engage with the companies you're invested in, ask about their governance practices, hold them accountable.
Because ultimately it's about all of us working together.
It is. It's about creating a culture of transparency and accountability from the top down.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty details of the code to the bigger picture of what good governance really means.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We've talked a lot about the how of good governance, the practical steps, the policies, the procedures.
Right, the nuts and bolts.
Exactly. But what about the why?
Ah, the existential question.
Exactly, because the code emphasizes things like company purpose, values, culture.
Right, the guiding principles.
But what happens when those things come into conflict?
That's a really interesting question.
What happens when a company's stated values don't quite align with its actual practices?
The age-old dilemma of saying one thing and doing another.
Exactly. We talk about aligning executive compensation with company values, for example.
Right, making sure everyone's on the same page.
But what if those values themselves are flawed or compromised?
It's about more than just ticking boxes. It's about making sure those boxes are worth ticking in the first place.
Exactly. So as you're navigating the world of corporate governance, don't just focus on the how, ask yourself the why as well.
Because ultimately it's about building better businesses and a better world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the UK Corporate Governance Code.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the world of corporate governance. And remember, good governance is everyone's responsibility. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.